So for the past, 2 or 3 months, we've been working on a pretty cool record. It's sort of one of those bucket list recordings that you only get to do maybe once or twice in your life. We're finally done tracking. We are at a different studio mixing this record. Let's have a look at where I'm at. So this is the view of the studio, man. Ain't that something else? We're on the 22nd floor with this view, mixing a really special record.
I can't believe diamonds so pearls, and I was gonna take you traveling the world. But I can love you, yeah, I'm gonna love you. I'll give you all of what I've got, the fancy finds, baby, I have not. Just gonna love you, yeah, I'm gonna love you. I'm gonna love you, baby. Cross my heart and hope to die.
Hello everybody, I'm Luke P and welcome back to Audio Geek. So why do you need to mix in analog in 2020? I mean, there's just so many different tools that you can use and get that analog sound. There's just so many different mixers that are migrating from large format consoles to maybe a laptop and an Apollo interface, or maybe just a laptop and their headphones. So if I'm gonna do a record and I need to get some really cool textures, I need to make sure that all these textures are held throughout the entire process. That's why we're mixing in an analog-based studio, because we need to retain those textures. That is just gonna make everything sound much more convincing and more powerful and just work way better with everything else we're doing. In my case, that we're working on this record with a Gregorian chant and just orchestras and all sorts of cool stuff. Everything just needs to have a certain kind of finesse that you're not gonna get unless you're mixing in analog. And sure, you can sort of emulate that if you put a lot of work into it. You can definitely get about the same results. The difference is you're gonna have to put a whole lot more work to get to the same spot. And maybe even then, it's not gonna be something special. There's an appreciation that needs to be had for mixing in analog, for mixing in a console, for using these outboard tools. They are just that, they're tools. They're gonna help you get the sound you want faster. Whereas if you're gonna work in the box and let's say you need a little bit of distortion, tough luck. You're gonna have to emulate that somehow. And you are limited by the digital headroom. The point where you get that little bit of harmonic distortion, it's not the same point where you would get that in an analog. That's where things start to get a little fuzzy, because if you want to get that same distortion, well, you're gonna have to emulate that by using maybe a Sans amp or dedicated distortion plugin or some different kind of shenanigans, where if you're an analog, you're just gonna go to the patch bay, patch it in, and things just work. So another argument for doing the inverse route of what everybody's doing and mixing in analog instead of mixing in the box, you get to impart the sound of the gear to your sound and make that your own. If you're a mixer and you always mix in analog, the console you're using or whatever summing bus you're using, that is gonna have a certain sound characteristic that is different from everything else. That's gonna be part of your sound. Myself, I've been mixing in an analog and an SSL console for 8 or 9 years. I know that console like the back of my hand, and I know exactly how it sounds. Today, I'm working on an API, and that sounds a lot different than my matrix. When you're mixing in the box, everybody has access to pretty much the same tools. Sure, you might own some plugins that other people don't. You're 100% sure that nobody's gonna own the same exact console that you do. Even if it's the same model, they don't sound exactly the same. I mean, this console, for instance, channel 1 and 2 have way lower volume than all the other channels. These things are what makes analog so attractive to people like me. You can get stuff that you cannot get in the digital realm. Stuff always works perfectly in plugins. In the real world, gear doesn't work perfectly. Those problems are actually positive. They add a little bit to the charm of using the gear. Sure, it's a whole lot more work, but it's just gonna make that specific sound that you're mixing a whole lot more unique, because nobody's going to be able to do the same exact thing without being in that same exact room. In today's world, when you want to really make stuff sound fresh and exciting and just completely different from anything else in the market, you need to make sure that you're mixing your stuff in studios that just give you that edge.
Golden trinkets, mobile phone, expensive shoes, you can get your own. Just gonna love you. Yeah, I'm gonna love you. Just gonna love you. Yeah, I'm gonna love you. I'm gonna love you, babe. Cross my heart and hope to die.
Okay, so I'm back at my studio to check the mixes. What's the final reason why I think mixing in analog is still relevant in 2020? And that is client experience. This is a little bit on the tangential side of this whole conversation, but it's an important point. The thing is, if you're working in the music industry as an audio engineer, music producer, or even as an artist, if you want to really stand out, you need to create unique products every time. If you're trying to deliver to your client something that sounds unique, you need to use every tool at your disposal. And mixing in analog is one heck of a tool to bring you something that sounds completely unique. Because, like I've said before, nobody's going to have the same exact console that you are going to have access to, be it you own the console or you go to a studio that has that console. Go and mix there. Do not mix in your bedroom because everybody else has that same exact setup. And I get it. Guys like Andrew Sheps are mixing in the box with their Apollo interfaces and just killing it. The thing is, these guys have mixed in consoles their entire life, and now they migrated to a mobile setup where their time and workflow is better spent doing stuff on the go than having to stay at a studio until they finish a project. It's more about the workflow than the sound. They can get the same sounds they did in analog, but the thing is, they know what the gear does to their sound. So they know how to reproduce that using other tools. If you're starting out and you haven't used a console, you're not going to be able to reproduce that. So my advice is, consider mixing an analog if you can, because it's going to make your life as a producer, as an audio engineer, as the artist, a whole lot easier. So I hope you like this video. Like and subscribe. Shoot me a comment. Follow me on social media. If you have any questions, shoot it down in the comments below. So I'll see you guys on the next one.